Hello and welcome to part 7 of 11. It's the 7-11. 7 days a week, 11 hours a day, or I'm not sure. Open till 11 o'clock at night. Maybe that's what it means. I've never really worked that one out in America. They always seem to be open 24 hours a day, and people will take me to a 7-Eleven. But leave that to one side. We're talking about the 1920s. We're talking about lessons which should have been learned but which weren't. We're talking about when World War One has ceased to be and treaties have come in. What happens, and what ships would you pick to start off talking about this period? I think I might have surprised you on this one. So, we have HMS Nelson class battleship, and the Turbine class battle destroyer of the Raging Marina, Esperaro. Now, I'm going to start off with the British battleship. I am well known for my views on this class as a design, and I will be elaborating on those and getting into that because it's pertinent to today's discussion. But I will start off by prefacing this with I have a little bit of a soft spot for these ships. They are a little bit slower in an era when everything else is getting faster. They are heavily armoured in an era where everything else looks like paper mache. And they are hugely powerful in terms of their firepower, which means they spend a lot of their lives being very disappointed because they're chasing after enemies who just won't do the fair thing and cut their speed by about 5 knots. But saying that, I have a soft spot for these ships. They make me feel happy. And I will admit, the one premium battleship which I did consider buying on World of Warships, which unfortunately is no longer available as of update 0.10.5, was HMS Nelson. Because, yes, she's only a tier 7 battleship, so she's not the most powerful of anything. But I thought I could have fun with that. Now, here are the problems with her. The treaty, of course, was discussed about building a battleship, but honestly, you could have built a very good battle cruiser on that tonnage limitation. The moment you take the armor down to battle cruiser levels, rather than battleship levels, i.e., its armored equivalent to the previous level of battleships, you can get away with those treble 16-inch guns. In fact, honestly, you could have gone one step further. You could have gone for treble 15-inch, slightly reduced armor, and a stonking great big amount of horsepower, and designed some really very, very interesting battle cruisers, which would have been really very useful in World War II. Would there be more useful Nelson Rodney? Probably. I always remember that Churchill envisages them as these anchors of the British battle line in a refighting not of Trafalgar more than Jutland, because whenever these people seem to be describing, and it's the politicians who are just as involved as the admirals in describing this and envisioning this, they seem to be talking about Trafalgar, not Jutland, of the fleet forming up line. If you think about Jutland, Yes, there is a part where the fleets are in line blasting each, but that's a very small part of the long-running battle. Most of it's going backwards and forwards, racing around, trying to get in the best position and blasting away at each other. It's not lines. And you look at the Royal Navy, coming out of World War One, what have they got on order? The G3s? The Admirals? They're battle cruiser classes. I think again this comes back to if they had gone with the admirals as the foundation for aircraft carriers, which I know is a regular lament of mine, a regular lament, and I apologise for being a uh, repeater of it, rather than courageous, glorious, and furious. Then you would have had far more of an emphasis for it because you'd have gone right. Then we've got three really fast big carriers and we've got three battle cruisers, four if you count Tiger. If we add in two more brand new battle cruisers, that means we have five pretty much new ships plus Tiger. That's a fairly good, fairly fast reaction fleet centered on those three carriers, meaning usually you should have two carriers and about four of those ships available. And that suddenly becomes your global rapid reaction task force, which for Britain would have made a lot of sense. For Britain, that would have been, oh, yeah. First decision on the carriers is made by Beatty. You can blame him for that one. The decision on the battleships over the battle cruisers is really pushed by the politicians. Yes, there are a few willing admirals who are nutty enough in it, but honestly, the admirals could have gone either way, and there were good arguments being made for both sides of the case. So, and obviously, the battle cruisers had won the case in the first part of the argument. Might they have gone for a 16-inch arm battle cruiser? They might have done. Again, you have a choice of 9 or 6 guns. Or maybe even 8 guns in 3 turrets. The point is, though, they had got so obsessed with the loss of the battle cruisers and the apparent destruction of these ships. When you consider the sheer amount of damage they took at Dogger Bank and other battles, the number of shells that hit them and they didn't go, they got so obsessed with the political image, and that's the trouble. World War One leaves a humongous cultural, emotional, psychological scar on the nation as a whole. That building a battle cruiser is an anathema to the government. Thank goodness there is no battleship equivalent built at the same time as Hood, so that people could sort of claim that she's a fast battleship. Yes, she was a battle cruiser. We all know she was a battle cruiser, but there would be lots of people going around and oh, really, she's a fast battleship, you know. She's got the same armor as a Queen Elizabeth class or an R class. Yeah. Just a fast battleship. We call her a battle cruiser to make the enemy, less worried about her, but she's really a fast battleship. You can imagine those conversations going on because of the scarring. So we go forward. Now the Royal Navy is allowed to build 2 new battleships. Why? Because despite the fact there isn't much difference between 15 and 16-inch guns, the British have made such a hissy fit at the Washington Treaty about being the only ones without a 16-inch battleship that they've had to be allowed to build 2 new ones. They also get HMS Hood completely through. They ignore HMS Hood. again, when people start to tell me that the Washington Treaty is America dictating to Britain, I sit there and go, but look at what Britain gets out of it versus America. What America gets out of it is pieces on paper which says we are the equal of Britain, which is massive. What the Royal Navy gets out of it is 2 brand new ships, and everyone looking the other way at their great big treaty busting ship they've just built. Yeah, they're kind of happy. And also, they also know the USS Congress. They do not believe they're going to fund the US Navy to even an inch of that. So, basically, yeah, you're equals on paper. So, when are Congress building the ships? Thought so. Would you like some beer to make you feel happier? Oh, you still have dry ships. Well, come over to our ship. We'll have whiskey and beer for you. Which is cruel, but practical. The Americans, though, of course, do manage to slowly get some funding and eke it out of Congress. Thanks to the treaty. The treaty helps them out. And it's really later in the 1930s that they start to really ramp up and get things going, which is an advantage for the Americans, because it means that their ships, when they start building them, are all new and lovely and spick and span, whereas the British ones are 20, 30, 40 years old. Swings and roundabouts and everything. It can be good from one direction, bad from another. Now, the thing is, though, let's look at this ship. Okay, so they're building it shorter to save weight. They are putting all the armament forward. Someone has the bright idea, we will raise B turret and super firing, and put B turret in the super firing position, and C turret will go down. Which is stupid. Because let's put it this way, if your ship is presenting the most narrow profile on the opponent it possibly can, it is heading straight for them. So, if C turret is the lower turret, and it's firing up, it's firing straight at the back of B turret. So it better be firing high. Could be iffy here, it could be problematic. So pretty much you're limiting yourself to A and B turret in practice if you're going straight for the target. If, however, you make C turret the super firing turret, and you maybe have B slightly raised up, but only sort of a little bit raised up in comparison to A turret. And C turret fires over B. B just needs to raise its guns up a bit to be clearing A, and A's forward. You could do far better. Basically, Nelson and Rodney, they're not a reaction to problems of battleships. They're not a reaction to problems with, in the reality, to problems of British battleship design. They are a product of the psychological scarring of World War One. They are a product of not winning Jutland and being obsessed with refighting Trafalgar in the political classes. And they are a product of basically not wanting to build battlecruisers because of politics. Which, again, is why battlecruisers should have been called frigates. And no one would have thought they should have been in the battle line. Jackie Fisher, that one's on you. Let's consider the Turbine-class destroyer. What are they an example of? Well, The Italians were just fighting a war against the Austro-Hungarians, who, after the First World War, ceased to exist. You get Austria, you got Hungary, you got Czechoslovakia, you've got all sorts of Eastern European countries now that have been reformed and recharged by what has happened after World War One. And the Italian Navy is seeking to build. How do I describe them? Pretty much enhanced torpedo boats. That is what they're building. They are 1,090 tons in standard, 1,700 tons in full load. 1,090 tons. They are small. They are 93 meters long. They've got a beam of 9.2 meters, so a beam to length ratio of less than 1 to 10. They're powered by 3 Thornycroft boilers, which provide, thanks to 2 geared steam turbines, 40,000 shaft horsepower to 2 shafts, a top speed of 33 knots. They have a maximum range of 3,200 nautical miles at 14 knots, a crew of nearly 180. They're armed with 2 twin 120mm, that's 4.7-inch guns, 2 single 40mm AA guns, 4 twin 13.2mm machine guns, and 2 triple torpedo tubes. And they're 533mm or 21-inch torpedo tubes, and 52 mines. And let's consider how they're sunk. Aquiline, built by Odro, sunk on mines laid by from the aircraft of HMS Illustrious outside Benghazi Harbour. Boreau, sunk by aircraft from Illustrious in Benghazi Harbour with a loss of 1 man. Both those ships were lost on the 17th of September 1940. Espero, this one pictured, sunk by HMAS Sydney off Tobruk during a troop transfer mission to Tobruk. Euro, sunk by German aircraft off Laros, Greece in October 1943, when Italy had switched sides. Nembo, sunk in July 1940 by Swordfish torpedo bombers from HMS Eagle in Tobruk Harbour. Ostro, sunk on the same day, also by Swordfish torpedo bombers from HMS Eagle in Tobruk Harbour with a loss of 42 men. That's in 1940. So 4 lost to, well, hang on, no, it gets worse. Turbine herself was sunk in September 1944 by rockets fired by United States Army Air Force aircraft in Salamis. And then Zephyro was sunk on the 5th of July 1940, so 15 days before her Nembo and Ostro, by Swordfish torpedo bombers from HMS Eagle and Tobruk. Seven of 8 were sunk by aircraft. No? Yeah. Only 1 was sunk by another ship. HMS Sydney. And the reason is quite simple. These ships were built rather like Nelson and Romney on the lessons of the previous war. And the previous war had been all about vicious torpedo boat on torpedo boat action and the nasty fights that would happen in the Aegean. Now, you can't predict aircraft coming in and getting as stronger as they do. These ships are built in and launched in 1927, 1928. we're talking aircraft are sort of 13 years away from what they accomplished in 1940, and arguably it's about 6, 7 years away from what we'd really see aircraft would be viable at doing. However, and this is again a problem slightly foisted on by the treaty system, the Italians, like many others, could have just built slightly more capacity into their ship to be expanded. Single 40mm AA guns. Twins. The 4.7-inch guns, they are theoretically general purpose, but that's a theoretically general purpose. The 4 twin machine guns, 13.2mm. Well, that's lovely. But what I'm saying is these are ships which are built as pack hunters. And then they end up fighting a war where they're not fighting as a pack. These defenses all work if they're acting as a pack. But you listen to how they're sunk. They're in pairs. A pack is not a pair of ships. World War One. It's only thought of as a concentrated naval war when you look at it in isolation. When you look at areas in isolation. When you study World War One in full, you get the idea it's a distributed war. It's a very distributed war. And I would argue the only navy which really gets that in the 1920s and 30s is the Royal Navy. Now, as much as they get that, they don't necessarily make the correct decisions based off it. They really don't. I would argue the Americans and the Japanese, especially because their main focus is fighting each other, and in the Japanese terms, it's the Kantai-Kessen, the decisive battle they're talking about. So again, you're not thinking about a distributed fight, you're thinking about one big, massive fight. So that's your doctrine. So you're not going to go thinking through that. And the Americans, again, with their fleet plan, their fleet exercises, they're very concentrated operations. But I think they're getting there. The thing is, the Americans then have 1939 to 1941 to watch what's the British are getting up to, what everyone else is getting up to, and the parts of them who have been making the case for distributed warfare. Because again, these navies are huge organizations. So you can always find someone to support your argument and your perspective. And they usually have someone who can figure it out. They usually have a large group of people, so they can call on people. The problem is, they don't necessarily have control at the top. And that's when you have to consider where the decisions are being made. The Royal Navy is very lucky. In the early 1930s, 1933, as I've said before, a guy called Admiral Henderson becomes Third Sea Lord. And he is at many points the lone voice on the Admiralty board, arguing his case for the things he's doing. But because he's Third Sea Lord, because he's in charge of procurement, because he can control and adapt how things are being done and what things are being done within a certain degree, the Royal Navy's prepared more than it would probably have been if he hadn't been there. So, again, there are times when people come back to me and go, the Royal Navy can't make any mistakes in your view. No. If you had left the procurement up to a guy called Admiral Chatfield, who was First Sea Lord at the same time as Henderson was Third Sea Lord, you would have had a completely different Royal Navy in World War II, and they would have been no way prepared for what happened. But you had a Third Sea Lord who was prepared to fight. And the fact that the Third Sea Lord goes back to, and he's the thinking officer who Jellicoe relies on to write his report to implement convoys in the First World War and talk about distributed warfare and how they're working up in the post-First World War environment. Again, the Royal Navy is the largest enough organisation that even though there are officers who strongly disagree with Henderson, he's a good officer, he's going to be used. He's not going to be got rid of. They don't have an excuse to get rid of him. I think Drac once put it that the thing is, these smaller these groups of officers, the small groups of officers who have the same groupthink in a smaller navy can have far more power because it's a smaller navy. Whereas in a larger navy, there's probably a majority of officers who are just going, well, we're not really thinking officers, we are doers. So, well, you guys are thinking and thinking that way, and you guys are thinking, you're both kind of interesting, so we're going to keep you both around and see which one works out. But we're the majority, so, and we're not going to go either way until we have to. So that's what happens in those senses. That's why the Royal Navy has this, but then it has other things. The Italian Navy is smaller. So is the French Navy. So is the German Navy. Arguably, to an extent, so is the Japanese Navy. And therefore, those small groups can have far more power and influence. And a small group in the Japanese and the Italian Navy are focusing in on this torpedo boat warfare. They still build one of the most balanced navies of any of the powers, and certainly the most balanced navy of the third rank naval powers under the treaties. I would argue it's far better than the French. But it carries mines. Lovely. It's not big enough to be the general purpose escort, and it's too big to be the torpedo boat attack ship. That's its problem. You're building a big torpedo boat, but it's not big enough to be a destroyer. It's trying to get round the treaty and get the most out of what you can on the treaty. Honestly, another couple of hundred tons, a bit more creative accounting, and they could have got a very good ship out of it. So, Spreadshirt. Now, why am I talking about this? Because if you haven't watched any of these episodes before, but you probably have, hopefully, but you might have, this might be the first one you're watching. If you have watched, you'll know what I'm about to say. If you haven't watched, this is brand new to you. So, there is a bragging rights bet going on between me and my aunt. This is how my family communicate our love for each other. We do bragging rights bets. The bet is this. If she doesn't think I can get to 13,000 subscribers by December 31st, 2021. If I can, she and my uncle will be pictured wearing Blackburn face masks. If I can't, she gets to gloat about, well, naval history not being that popular on YouTube and Drac only being as popular as he is because he looks like Omar Sharif. That's my mum and aunt's decision. They do watch a lot of Drac and they have decided that he looks like Omar Sharif. It's a good job I'm friends with him. It's a good job. He is such a nice guy. Good job I'm friends with him. Otherwise, you could get a complete complex master. We'll leave that to one side. But that's that. So please, if you like, please share, please subscribe, please press the little bell down there, and hope to see you in one of the next ones. Speaking of next ones, what we've got coming up? Well, after this series, it goes on to the next long patrol, which is Chiefs of Staff of the Axis Navies. Woohoo! That's going to be cool. And you will notice there are some lives stuck in here. There is a pseudo patron, which was on the 2nd of September, which should be up there. And then there's Brewships 57, which will have turned into a Q&A. And so will 12 as is the 12th of September one. And I've got two lives here: Shipbuilding, which of course goes with this series, and Carl Donitz. They are both hope to do because if I am on the research trip, which I could be going on, and that's COVID and various other things allowing, then I might be in a place which has very, very poor signal and it might not work. Either way, we'll find out. I know. Thank you for watching. I hope you've enjoyed, and